Welcome to Part 2 of the Ampico Code. The purpose of this DVD is to improve the understanding of the expression coding used to operate the Ampico reproducing piano. To fully grasp the concepts presented here, it is suggested that Part 1 of the Ampico Code be reviewed. In case you don't have Part 1, a brief review is included here. Part 2 is not limited to the time constraints that controlled the length of Part 1, which was presented as a part of a 45-minute technical session at the 2010 AMICA Convention in Buffalo, New York. Included in this part will be more detail about both the Ampico A and B system of coding, including more examples. Next is a look at the expanded system of coding employed by Frank Milne that appeared around 1934. This is followed by a topic never publicized before, explaining the operation of factory demonstration concert grand pianos. Two sections follow that give my technique of fine regulation of A and B systems. The DVD concludes with an explanation of how the new Podolsky rolls issued in 1986 by the Chicago Chapter of AMICA were made. The common forms of information describing the Ampico coding system do not tell the entire story. These simplified versions describing how the system works have led to widespread misunderstandings. As a result, various conversion programs have omitted all but the most coarse dynamic expression codes. Even some very well-funded efforts have misrepresented the full fidelity of the Ampico system coding. In general, the Ampico A system gives expression to the music rolls by two control devices working together. One device produces 7 incremental steps from soft to loud. The other device is called a crescendo, and it can change the loudness smoothly, much like a volume control on a radio. Step expression is controlled by 3 holes on each side of the tracker bar. The holes are numbered, counting from the outside edge. We refer to these holes by number and the side which they are located on. The Ampico has 2 sets of expression controls, one for the bass and one for the treble. Holes 2, 4, and 6 can be opened in various combinations to create 7 steps. After any holes are opened, the valve it controls is locked on until canceled by hole 7. Hole 7, the cancel hole, will only cancel a step if its hole is closed. Here's how it works. Perhaps too fast to see, so we'll take it in slow segments. Step 2 is locked on. These notes are played. While Step 2 is canceled, Step 4 is added. That level is applied here. Step 2 is again locked on. This affects these notes. All are canceled. Step 2 and 6 are on at the same time, but not locked, as the cancel hole is open too. These notes are then played. Since the cancel hole stays open longer, 2 and 6 go off when their holes close. Finally, 6 is on, but not locked since 7 is open too. Now 4 and 2 are added, but the longer 2 perforation finally goes beyond the cancel hole, so that the intensity drops from 2, 4, and 6 on to just 2 on. If this is too fast to comprehend here, stop the DVD and look at a roll and analyze the short distance with lots of perforations. What is often overlooked for the Ampico A is that the pump can increase its output. Normally, the pump produces about 20 inches of vacuum. If the step holes 2 and 6 are opened, it creates a stack pressure of about 15 inches, which is enough to start collapsing the amplifier pneumatic. It takes about 1/2 second to partially collapse. So if the holes 2 and 6 are on for about 1/2 second, the pump starts increasing its output. If step holes 4 and 6 are locked on for the 1/2 second, the amplifier goes even higher and the pump increases to its maximum to about 30 inches or above. This enables the Ampico A to produce 21 distinct steps or volume levels. In analyzing the code for the Ampico A, the amplifier must be considered. Most of us understand that if we set the modify switch to brilliant, the piano will play louder. The instruction pamphlet tells us to put the switch in brilliant to hear the full fidelity in the rolls. Understanding that coding can essentially give 3 pump outputs that result in 21 different steps is perhaps the most important point of this DVD. It is this often overlooked fact that makes most MIDI conversions inaccurate. Skillful coding controls the position of the amplifier. When it is desired to keep the amplifier at rest for softer playing, the 3 highest step codes are never allowed to stay on for the 1/2 second necessary time to collapse the amplifier. In those instances, the intensity is canceled immediately after the note is struck and then reset again before it is needed. Look at this example where the cancel hole, number 7, is on continuously and each intensity is reset numerous times. When the louder passages of music occur, the editors bring the amplifier into use. Keeping the 2 and 6 combination set yields the 50% setting. For full amplification, the 4 and 6, or the 2, 4, and 6 combinations are set. Since either treble or bass can set the amplifier, the code necessary to keep the amplifier active may be passed back and forth between bass and treble. It is common to find code setting the amplifier on the side of the piano stack in which no notes are being played. Look at this example, where the amplifier is fully closed by the treble code with no treble notes, and the bass notes sound at the intensities set with the holes 2 and 6. For softer playing, the editors cancel the louder codes immediately after they are used to accent a note. Those codes look like this. For louder passages, the codes remain on until they must be changed for the next event. Those codes look like this. Next, we'll use this wonderful roll as a prime example of the coding techniques. The Chopin Nocturne, of course, will have extremely soft, delicate playing, but will also possess passionate outbursts which will require the Ampico to play at near maximum levels. The video shows the treble coding only, but it clearly follows the rules for setting the amplifier just discussed. Like codes obviously have different volume levels, proving the importance of the amplifier. The amplifier changes all 7 steps, not just the loudest ones. Before leaving the Ampico A system, we need to mention a few words about the crescendo. Think of the crescendo as a touch-up device. In most instances, it is added to the established step codes to give smooth rise and falls in the general piano volume. Rarely is it used to establish the overall volume level and change that level in large amounts. That technique seems to be present only in the early rolls from the Stoddard Ampico era. But the crescendo gave roll editors great flexibility. The steps and crescendo combination offered a platform unequaled by Ampico competitors. Another clarification of the Ampico A steps needs to be mentioned. The combination of holes 2 and 4 is called alternate for hole 6 in the service manuals. Yet, if measurements are taken comparing these 2 intensities, the 2 and 4 combination is always less than 6 alone. They are not equal by any means. Looking at the actual coding on rolls, we see the 2 and 4 combination used often. Further study indicates that it is used to set an intensity that is intended to be softer than hole 6. For the sake of avoiding confusion, we will continue to claim that the Ampico A is a 7-step system, even though it clearly has this additional step. Jumping ahead for just a moment, the Ampico B also has the same characteristic. In fact, hole 6 intensity is typically 1 inch higher in vacuum than the holes 2 and 4 in combination. But in the B discussion ahead, we'll not call this another step. Now let's talk about the Ampico B. This wonderful instrument appeared around 1929. It was designed by Clarence Hickman, who was a physicist with a PhD. The Ampico B also has 7 steps, but adds 1 additional step that is softer. The Ampico B can also lock its pump in 3 distinct output modes, and within each of these modes, it can have 8 steps. This means the Ampico B system can produce 24 distinct steps or volume levels. This is fully explained in the 1929 service manual. The Ampico B differs from its predecessor because its step intensity scale and the crescendo scale are additive. It takes both the highest step and the highest crescendo for that system to achieve maximum playing volume. Conversely, the Ampico A may achieve maximum volume with either the step system or the crescendo system acting alone. In this part 2 of the Ampico code, new material will be introduced to inform you of the full capabilities of the Ampico B, including Frank Milne's scheme of using the B system to expand the steps by another 18 steps. Additionally, for the first time ever, the little-known concert demonstration piano system will be explained. The correlations used in producing the Podolsky rolls in 1986 will be shared. These 3 areas of knowledge, combined with the previous revelations of the Ampico A system, should aid in making all future Ampico conversions more accurate. While none of the reproducing piano systems were perfect, the Ampico has fewer major design flaws in its expression control scheme. The Ampico can access virtually its full spectrum of dynamics in the space of just one step of perforation, and in the next step, another entirely new level. The Duo-Art can access only 2 set levels of volume in the same time frame, while the Welty is always limited to a set incremental change. In all fairness, all these systems may sound good if they are in proper regulation. As was mentioned earlier, the Ampico B adds an extra step, which is called the sub-intensity. It requires an extra hole at the treble end of the tracker bar. This new step reduces the playing volume slightly from the minimum intensity setting. So let's take a look at how the codes work on the Ampico B. Like its predecessor, the holes in the tracker are numbered from the edge towards the middle. The B tracker has one more hole on each side, so to keep the numbering scheme the same as the A, the extra holes are given the number 0. The step intensities are controlled by holes 2, 4, and 6. The number 7 hole is the cancel hole. This scheme is the same on both bass and treble. The extra hole on the treble side is the sub-intensity hole. When it is opened, it causes both the bass and treble regulators to slightly lower the vacuum level. The cancel hole on the treble will cancel the treble sub input, while the cancel hole on the bass will cancel the bass sub input. The cancel action only happens if the sub hole is no longer open. Any step intensity may be canceled in this manner. When all expression holes are closed, the piano is at minimum intensity. Opening hole 2 will cause a slight increase in vacuum. Opening hole 4 will cause a small increase in vacuum, but more than hole 2. Opening hole 6 will cause an even greater increase. After the merger of Ampico and Duo-Art, Frank Milne started making Ampico rolls. At first, his rolls were rather dull, but as he learned the system, his Ampico rolls became quite lively. Sometime around 1934, Milne started combining the sub-intensity step with other intensities. This further expanded the B steps by another 18 fixed steps. Of course, many of these steps are near duplicates, so practically speaking, the useful steps by the Milne scheme were fewer. Here is an example of the Milne code. It goes by too fast to comprehend, so again, we'll look at it and explain it step by step as it progresses. Even though the subcode affects both the bass and treble, we'll limit this analysis to the treble side. First, we see the long cancel perforation. Next, the number 4 hole and sub are opened. This yields a plane level slightly less than if hole 2 had been opened. Next, sub opens again for setting the bass side, as it is already locked on for the treble. Next, the sub opens again with the number 2 hole. Now the treble level is controlled by holes 2, 4, and sub. This yields a level somewhere in between just 2 and just 4 being open. Next, the cancel hole cancels all treble settings. This is followed by hole 4 and sub together. Again, everything is canceled and hole 2 is quickly added, but it is immediately canceled as the cancel hole remains open. Again, the sub 4 combination is set, followed by adding 2 to the combination. Next, all is canceled. Then 4 and sub return. Next, a long cancel with sub and 2 being reset twice. The result of all this is a very delicate presentation that is snappy yet soft. Clearly, the use of the sub in this passage is a complete departure from earlier applications, where the sub was used only to soften the minimum intensity setting. Holes 1 and 5 on the treble side control the crescendo. There is only one crescendo on the Ampico B, and it affects both treble and bass. Hole 1 on the bass side is not connected to anything. Hole 5 on the bass side controls the electric shutoff or repeat after rewinding is complete. If the roll is B-coded, the perforations on the bass holes 1 and 5 are identical to the perforations 1 and 5 on the treble side. This was done to make the rolls control the A system correctly. But on the B, the bass holes 1 and 5 are totally ignored by the expression system. Let's look at the crescendo in operation. The 1929 service manual explains the function of the crescendo very clearly. Here is a short demonstration. The 1T hole, when open, will cause the crescendo to collapse at a slow rate. About 4 seconds time is required to fully collapse the crescendo. The collapsing action causes the pump to increase the vacuum pressure it is producing. In rough numbers, the pump about doubles its output, from about 20 inches to about 40 inches. This increase passes through both the bass and treble expression devices and roughly doubles the vacuum level set by each step device. Once the tracker hole 1T is closed, the crescendo returns to rest at the same rate as it collapsed. If during crescendo operation the number 5T hole is opened, the rate of the crescendo movement increases dramatically. Full collapse can occur in about 1/2 second. The same is true if the crescendo is returning to rest, that is, after collapsing, the number 1T hole is closed, the number 5T hole is open, it will hasten and increase the rate of decrescendo. To put it in visual perspective, 4 or 5 single perforations in a chain will fully collapse the crescendo at the fast rate. The next B difference to explore is the 0B hole. This single hole can do several things. First, if this hole is opened, the trigger pneumatic opens. The trigger is normally held closed by vacuum. The pneumatic is spring-loaded open, so once the vacuum ceases, it opens quickly. Another function of the 0B hole is to open the 5T fast crescendo control line, just as if the 5T perforation had occurred. Thus, if the crescendo is moving in either direction, the open trigger hole, 0B, will cause the crescendo to move at its fast rate. It is this 0B hole that enables the pump to be locked into different output positions. The trigger pneumatic positions this odd-looking device, which is the trigger. The two components of the trigger are a small post and a ramp. The ramp can lock the crescendo connecting rod in 2 positions. This is accomplished by lugs or protrusions on the rod not being able to slide past the ramp. Normally, the trigger is retracted out of the way when the trigger spring opens after the crescendo has started to collapse. The ramp is in the way of the rod that contains the lugs. When the trigger pneumatic is collapsed, the ramp is now trapped in the area of the lugs, or the rod is trapped by the lugs and the ramp. This now locks the pump in what is called first amplification. A second episode of the trigger opening and fast crescendo will lock the pump in second amplification. Let's watch this happen. This is what the code looks like. Here is how it works. To return from first amplification to normal, 3-dot perforations release the trigger lock on the rod. To go from normal to second, the code looks like this. Here is how the mechanism looks in operation. To release from second to first amplification, 2-dot perforations occur. If the release from second to normal is required, a longer perforation of about 6 dots is used. Finally, if a very rapid change to second is required from normal, the 2-step process can be omitted. The coding starts as a fast crescendo of 1 inch or more of perforations, then joined by the 0B for about another inch. What happens is that the crescendo is fully collapsed in 1/2 second, and then the ramp on the trigger goes under the rod by forcing it up. Here's how it looks. This is what I call the under capture. As the B code became fully developed, editors started using what I call housekeeping perforations. When the pump is in normal output, a short distance after each crescendo use, 3 dots appear on the 0B. This is to make sure that the pump amplifier remains in normal position. Here's how it looks in operation. The next topic has never been shared. This will be all new material to almost all of you. The Ampico system in some concert grands was intended as a demonstration instrument in concert halls. Here is a program from a 1925 concert in Chicago. I have only found one of these instruments totally intact. From that instrument, I was able to figure out most of the functions that the piano could perform. After that piano was restored, the Chicago chapter at the 1983 AMICA convention presented a concert featuring the piano with orchestra. Here's a small excerpt of that performance, playing the Saint-Saëns G minor concerto with Misha Levitsky playing the Ampico. Various special components make this Ampico quite different. The piano contains a special modified pump with a double pulley driven by two motors. The motor pulleys are much larger, and thus the pump turns about twice the speed as a normal Ampico pump. Internally, the pump has a pneumatic that can force the spill valve totally closed. This requires another external spill valve to control the pump output. That spill valve is in the hose network. Without the external spill valve, the pump connecting rods would fail. Each step intensity device has connections to its 3 intensity pneumatics. These connections form the sense lines to a logic device that triggers the internal pump spill override. If either step device has intensities 2, 4, and 6 set simultaneously for about 1/2 second, the pump will shift to maximum output. The crescendos have no effect on this operation. It is step-related only, and either bass or treble system can trigger the maximum output. The pump will stay in this state until both step devices cancel at least one of the intensities. Then the pump returns to normal output almost instantly. When the pump internal override system is inactive, the pump still responds as a normal Ampico A pump. That is, it will spill at about 20 inches. As the 2 and 6 intensities or the crescendos bring the stack pressure up to about 15 inches, the normal amplifier will begin to close. It closes fully at about 18 inches of stack pressure. Keep in mind, this part of the normal pump amplification can be triggered by either bass or treble and either step or crescendo device. The side of the stack with the highest vacuum will control the collapse of the normal pump amplifier. The second or external spill valve is usually set to spill at about 55 inches. Here is a factory placard showing the settings recommended. Because the pump is rotating at high speed, the super amplification can be sustained near maximum volume during high demand passages. This is important if the piano is performing with an orchestra during triple forte passages. There is another attribute of the concert demonstration piano to discuss. Some of these Ampico concert grands also possessed controls to start the roll drive by remote control. This was accomplished by putting a shutoff in the drawer air motor supply line. Special perforations on the roll stopped the air motor, and a remote push button was used to start the roll again. Another button was pushed to rewind the roll. The RCC Mason & Hamlin had two circular pieces of paper glued to the rim. Each had a single word typed on the paper. One said play and the other said re-roll. This valve would close, shutting off the air motor if a rewind perforation crossed the tracker bar. Nothing else in the drawer was shut off, just the air motor. To start the air motor, a remote control tablet with two push buttons was connected to the piano. One button could start the air motor. The other button shifts the transmission into rewind, and that action also starts the air motor as it bypasses the shut-off valve function. The remote control can be disabled, and the drawer can be operated in the normal fashion. What is normally the Ampico off-on switch on the left side of the spool box selects the remote control or normal control function. These pianos had no means of turning off the Ampico portion. A few more details make the demo instrument unique. The Chickering pianos have more available space due to the beam structure layout. Those pianos came equipped with 4 electric motors. Only 2 of the motors are used at one time. 2 motors operated on AC current and 2 motors operated on DC current. Putting the belts on the appropriate motors allowed the piano to play in a variety of venues. Remember, in 1925, today's standard 60-cycle current was not universal. It was not unusual to find DC in auditoriums. The beam structure in the Mason & Hamlin concert grand did not allow for the installation of 4 motors. 2 motors were still used to drive the pump simultaneously. The beam structure required the most distant motor to have a 100-inch belt, and that belt had to pass over a double pulley on the other motor. Since the pump output covered such a wide range, the standard Ampico roll motor governor was inadequate. To correct that problem, a second governor was installed in the drawer supply line. This was a highly modified regular drawer governor that had no tempo control. It only had one fixed level of output, but with normal governor function, adjusted by a leaf spring. The standard drawer governor, having a regulated supply, then could cope with the radical pump changes which were first smoothed out by the primary governor. There has been a lot of information presented up to this point in this DVD. This concludes the lecture part of this instructional DVD. The Ampico A codes and the Ampico B codes have been explained in great detail. The key bit of knowledge discussed is that both A and B system step codes operate on different levels of amplification. It is this fact that makes most emulations of the Ampico code fall short. Amplifier status must always be calculated from prior events before converting the current step code into MIDI values. This is a cumbersome but necessary detail. Also, Frank Milne exploited the unplanned capabilities of the sub-intensity system. Those techniques should be used by anyone coding new rolls. Conversely, any conversion of his rolls into electronic formats must recognize those subtleties that he employed. This is a logical place to take a break. Still to come are chapters on regulating the Ampico B and A. And finally, a discussion revealing the method used in coding the Podolsky rolls, which utilized all the previously discussed coding attributes. Also, 3 videos of complete rolls in operation, which can be heard in full fidelity, are yet to come. All sections that follow are divided into chapters that show in the main menu when you first started the DVD. You may access each chapter directly from the main menu. The DVD will continue if you do not shut it off. Perhaps watching the concert grand is a good finale to review the information you just received. The treble stack pressures are displayed. The pressure gauge is not very accurate below 15 inches, but it clearly shows the full range of the instrument. Listen now as Julius Chaloff plays Islami. Here are some helpful tips in regulating the Ampico A system. Nothing here contradicts the factory manuals, it just refines it. The most important attribute in fine regulation is extremely reliable pianissimo playing and only moderate loudness in the mid-range. The majority of rebuilt Ampicos sound harsh and loud. This must be avoided. The following regulation procedure does not require a test roll. In fact, the test roll is really cumbersome. All test functions can be controlled underneath the grand by removing certain tubes from the expression cutout. Using this technique is a real time saver. Or sometimes it is easier to take readings after poking holes in the tape covering the tracker bar. When judging the performance of an Ampico in an attempt to make it sound its best, use only good condition original A-coated rolls. Make sure you understand the coating scheme and pick rolls that will offer a broad spectrum of dynamics. Set the pump spill valve initially to around 18 inches. Cover the tracker bar with tape. Cover the take-up spool hole. Set the tempo to 70. Disable the amplifier. Connect the gauge to the treble side of the stack. Remove tubes 2T, 4T, 6T, and set 18 inches. This will give a more pleasing, moderate volume level. Many pianos have the spill set at 20 inches or above, which tends to make the piano sound harsh or just too loud. Replace tubes 2T, 4T, and 6T. Open the cancel briefly, read the gauge. Move the gauge to the bass side and read the gauge again. Set the bass crescendo to match the treble reading. Balance the bass and treble regulators by taking readings at every step on both sides. Write each reading down in 2 columns, bass and treble. If one side is consistently higher, slightly reduce the opening of the spring pneumatic on that side. Use the leather nuts and the round metal nut to do this. Use this setup. Disconnect the treble tube from the amplifier. Now make sure the amplifier is in operation. Open holes 2T, 4T, and 6T, and on the bass side, open holes 2B and 6B. This will cause the amplifier to move. Connect the gauge to the treble side of the stack and read the pressure. Very carefully set the amplifier spring so that the pneumatic collapses 50%. The gauge should read amplified pump pressure caused by the bass holes 2 and 6. Expect to get a gauge reading of about 22 to 25 inches of pump pressure. Again, carefully set the amplifier spring so that the pneumatic collapses fully with intensity holes 4 and 6 open. Observe the amplifier fully collapsed. Adjust the screw to obtain 30 inches. To get the previous setting and this one correct, it may take numerous attempts moving both the spring and the stop screw. To make this video, it was easier to set the camera to shoot the tracker bar, and thus I poke holes in the tape for all setups. In real life, it's easier to do this under the piano, removing tubes. So in this video, when I say remove tubes, that is synonymous with poking holes in the tracker bar tape. Now reconnect all tubes. Experiment with the maximum setting of the amplifier. Do this with the screw on the amplifier pneumatic. Rarely do rolls sound good if over 30 inches is set. Readjust the minimum intensity on both sides to find the absolute lowest setting possible. Usually, the bass notes start missing before the treble as the vacuum is reduced. When that minimum is found, reduce the treble only by about another 1/2 inch if possible. Write down these pressures. This will be the basis of all future settings. The test roll is only good for coarse adjustment. Subjective listening of original rolls should be used for fine adjustment. Keep a log of each change and which rolls were used in making a decision to change. If the piano has a loud pedal compensation device, it should be adjusted by a listening test. First, check that when the piano is off, these pneumatics are about 50% open. The leather nuts connecting the rod to the spring pneumatic must be loose. Where the rod is connected to the compensator pneumatic by a screw, it must be loose. With the piano on and at minimum intensity, check the gauge pressure. Remove tube 3B and observe about 1/2 inch drop in both treble and bass. Select a note in each section to play. Connect all tubing. From the covered tracker bar, play a single note by quickly releasing its hole. Repeat with hole 3B open. Listen for exactly the same volume. Do this several times using your finger on the tracker holes. Adjust the 50% opening of the compensator to achieve even volume in each test. The last area of fine regulation concerns the amount of movement of the hammer rail lift. In general, this soft pedal device should lift the hammer about 50% of the distance to the strings. When conducting minimum intensity tests, make small changes to the lift height to achieve a more even pianissimo. For example, if a few notes skip, increase the vacuum by 1/4 of an inch and change the lift height by 1/8 of an inch higher. Continue to experiment within a small range to get the best possible results. Regulating the Ampico B is less complex as few things can be safely changed in that system. Again, nothing here contradicts the factory manuals, it just refines it. It is imperative that only proper B-coded rolls are used in judging performance. Many Harold Powell rolls marked as B-coded are not properly B-coded. These rolls usually can be identified by the label where Powell has added a B after the roll number. Those numbers are usually below 68,000. If the bass crescendo perforations do not exactly parallel the treble crescendo perforations, it is not a B-coded roll. Do not use these in making adjustments. If possible, use only original B-coded rolls. Before adjusting the Ampico, make sure that the action is in good regulation. Pay close attention to getting the let-off very close and uniform. Unlike regulating the A, the test roll is very handy, if not necessary, to check the Ampico B. The important parts of the test roll are the ones that set the amplifier system. The note compensation roll is also important. Check the minimum pump pressure, about 18 to 20 inches, but not below 17 inches. If it is low, get a stronger spring if necessary. With the first intensity adjuster pulled all the way out, that's the minimum setting, set the needle valves on the bass and treble to the lowest reliable setting. Any notes that skip should have the note compensation screw on that pneumatic adjusted to open the span. Use the note compensation roll, but first set the bass slightly higher than the treble, about 1/2 inch. Before starting the roll, disconnect the hammer rail lift tube 3T from its valve. Follow the instructions on the note compensation roll, but stop the roll as each note opens. Use your finger to cover each hole for 1 second, then promptly release each hole. The hole must be perfectly centered on the tracker hole. Reduce the needle valve settings until the notes just barely speak. Continue the test as above, adjusting the pneumatic screws until all notes sound uniformly. The bottom bass notes will require almost full span to sound. Make sure to set them first. Run the test roll at listed speed and check for uniformity. If most notes skip, raise the vacuum level slightly. Continue raising the vacuum until no notes skip. Readjust the notes often, but be cautious when opening the span. Going too far will cause the span to fully open, and the poppet will then push up on the key. Check by looking for any hammer that is slightly raised. If the note compensation screws are loose in the wooden flanges, they will rattle. After all adjustments are complete, very thin PVC glue can be applied to the poppet thread just above the wooden finger. The glue will run into the thread and stop the rattle, but most important, it won't prevent further adjustment. With all notes sounding at uniform volume, replace the 3T tube and play some rolls. Raise the vacuum level slightly if necessary. Use the Ampico B test roll to test all functions. The pump amplifier must work perfectly. Failure of the amplifier to remain locked in first or second amplification is usually caused by a weak leaf spring, not a worn lug as suggested in the Gibbons book. The leaf spring presses down on the rod and is mounted in the wooden structure that guides the rod. Bending the leaf spring into a greater arc usually will fix the problem. This concludes the Ampico B regulation section. Next, the full-length Milne roll that we used earlier can be seen in action on the Ampico B. While the coating is whizzing by too fast to comprehend, the performance is really enjoyable. Keep in mind, this is a four-hand arrangement. The final chapter features one of the Podolsky rolls released in 1986. This roll can be stopped and started at will to study the coding and editor's marks on the roll. It is short, lasting just a little over 1 minute. Using Wayne Stankey's studio piano, the testbed for his system now incorporated in several pianos, Leo Podolsky played his selected program. Robbie Rhodes wrote a conversion program that took the recorded data and printed out all specifics of every note played. His conversion program also generated a perforation file used to drive a perforator. Custom music rolls perforated each selection in 88-note format. Members of the Chicago Chapter of AMICA penciled in the dB value or decibel value next to every note on the rolls. An overview of the roll with all dB values shown was then made. From the overview, sections of the roll of louder playing were identified. These sections were marked as needing some degree of amplification on both Ampico A and B systems. Those marks are in green ink. Each roll was divided into sections of normal, first amplification, and second amplification. The same dB level can be achieved in several ways. If the marked area could all be played correctly with the amplifier set above normal, then the code was applied to lock first or second amplification, and the note codes were selected from the applicable section of the lookup chart. A special edit desk was made that contained punch dies for adding expression perforations. The dies had 8 positions on each side, located very precisely. Using a small single punch, every expression hole was added to the 88-note roll. The roll already was perforated from the original data with soft and loud pedal perforations, but these needed to be edited. Here is a closer look at the data printout. Each note played shows with its MIDI number. The position or distance from the beginning of the roll is shown. The duration is given, and the dB is also shown. The header of the printout shows the tempo. In this case, the odd tempo of 96.19 is necessary because the jumbo roll begins at tempo 80, and this selection is near the end of the roll. Here's how the punch works. To give a clean perforation, 2 thicknesses of paper are used. Dozens of rolls of adding machine tape served as the second thickness. After making a single perforation, the paper is advanced by hand to form a slot or chain perforation. Alignment marks on the solid tracker bar show when a note hole is dead center with the punch, or 3/32 of an inch in advance of the punch. A modified T-square with a tracker music scale was used to check for incorrect notes. For the B system, the amplifier was set using the trigger. For the A system, the option of maintaining or canceling set codes keeps the amplifier in the proper position. At that point, the roll became playable with expression on the Ampico. Listening tests were made on a minimum of 3 different pianos. That almost always resulted in some adjustments. The master rolls were returned to custom music rolls for a final scan, which rendered a master file for all rolls. All coding techniques mentioned earlier in this DVD are present in this roll. The coding incorporates the sub-intensity used in conjunction with other intensities. It also uses the full attributes of the concert demo instrument. The pressure gauge shows how the climax builds through the final passage of ascending notes and finally striking the high G at full triple forte, the loudest note in the entire piece. This tune has everything needed to demonstrate Ampico coding, and yet it's just a bit longer than 1 minute. Listen and watch as the roll plays on the concert Grand Chickering. While the likelihood of needing to code for the concert system is almost nil, the information and example is still included to complete this tutorial. But including the concert demo style of coding assures proper coding for the A system. This concludes Part 2 of the Ampico code. It was my intent to give a greater understanding of the Ampico systems. I attempted to organize the material here in a manner that is logical. Even though some of it goes by quickly, the chapters will make it easy to revisit areas you may want to review. I know this stuff isn't for everyone, but it needed to be collected in one location and shared. As always, I'm happy to discuss any of the topics covered. Thank you for your attention.